Hello everyone and welcome to my video lecture series. Okay, so let's continue with the chapter. So we have finished with the anatomy of the human respiratory system, right? Then we started with mechanism of respiration, that was in the last lecture, and we completed with breathing and external respiration. Now let us start with the third part under mechanism of respiration, and that is called as internal respiration. Okay, so today we are going to cover only internal respiration. Okay, and then cellular respiration, which is a very short part, that we'll be covering in the next lecture. Okay, now this is the most important part of mechanism of respiration, remember that. Okay, and please pay attention and focus more on this lecture, because from the exam point of view also this part is very important. Now under internal respiration, basically we have to study two things. First thing that we have to study is transport of oxygen. Okay, so how oxygen is transported from the lungs to the cells. And second thing that we have to study in internal respiration is transport of carbon dioxide. Okay, so the transport of carbon dioxide deals with the carbon dioxide which is generated at the cells and how is it transported to the lungs. Okay, so we are going to study these two things. So let us start with the first part, that is transport of oxygen. Okay, now out of the total amount of oxygen which is present, 97% is transported by binding with hemoglobin. Okay, so 97% of oxygen present in the alveolar air, okay, diffuses through the alveolus and enters the pulmonary capillaries and it attaches with hemoglobin. So 97% of oxygen binds with hemoglobin present in the blood. Okay, so the function of hemoglobin is to allow oxygen to bind to it, and then blood carries oxygen to the different cells. Okay, whereas 3% of the oxygen, it dissolves in the plasma of blood, and that plasma carries the oxygen. So these are the two ways in which oxygen is carried by the blood to the cells. Okay, so for all those who don't know, blood is made up of two things. First is the plasma is the liquid part of the blood which mainly contains water and plasma proteins, and inside that plasma are present different kind of cells. For example, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Okay, and together plasma and all these cells form the blood. Okay, so first of all, this forms a very low portion of transport, this 3% which is present. So that oxygen will directly dissolve in the plasma, and that plasma will take that oxygen to the cells, and when it reaches the cells, the oxygen will diffuse out and enter the cells, and it will be used in respiration. Okay, the important part over here is this, the 97% of oxygen which binds with hemoglobin. So how does that happen? So now let us see. As you know, the partial pressure of oxygen is very high in the alveolar air, right? It is 104 millimeters of mercury. So what happens is, the oxygen diffuses into the pulmonary capillary, because in pulmonary capillary the partial pressure of oxygen is 40 millimeters. So diffusion occurs, and when it diffuses into the pulmonary capillary, it binds with hemoglobin. So the reaction is somewhat like this: one hemoglobin molecule binds with 4 molecules of oxygen to give you a complex which is Hb4O2. Okay, and this structure is called as oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so 97% of oxygen combines with the hemoglobin and it forms this structure which is called oxyhemoglobin. Since I want to balance it out, I have added 4 over here. Is this clear? Okay, so then what happens is, this oxyhemoglobin is formed in the RBCs. Okay, and these RBCs take this oxyhemoglobin along with them. So the blood is flowing towards the cells or tissues now, because the oxygen is needed by the tissues. As soon as that blood reaches the cells or tissues, what happens is, this reaction becomes reversible. So this Hb4O2, okay, when it reaches the cell, so I am writing it over here, when it reaches the cell or tissue, it breaks down into hemoglobin and the 4 molecules of oxygen are released. So that oxygen goes to the cell uses it, hemoglobin is free again. Is this clear? So I hope this is clear. What is oxyhemoglobin? That is clear. Now one thing I want to state is that while writing oxyhemoglobin, normally we don't write it like Hb4O2. Okay, normally the term for writing oxyhemoglobin is HbO2. So you can write oxyhemoglobin as HbO2 also. Okay, so please remember that, because in the latter parts of this lecture I am not going to write oxyhemoglobin like this. You can also write it as HbO2. Okay, is this clear? Now the question arises that why are 4 oxygen molecules attached to one hemoglobin? First of all, please remember guys that one RBC or one red blood cell, okay, red blood cell is also called as erythrocyte. We'll be learning that in the coming lectures. So one RBC has approximately 300 million hemoglobin molecules. Okay, so one RBC doesn't have one hemoglobin molecule. Hemoglobin molecules are very, very small. One RBC, one red blood cell will have 300 million. And each of these hemoglobin molecules, they have 4 iron atoms attached to them. So if I want to draw the structure of hemoglobin, I can show it like this. This is the hemoglobin and there are 4 iron atoms attached to the hemoglobin. Okay, so Fe2 plus I am showing, and each of these iron atoms is it can bind to one oxygen molecule. It is capable of binding. So if I want to bind the oxygen, then one oxygen over here, other oxygen over here, other oxygen over here, and one more oxygen over here. So now you can understand why hemoglobin forms is Hb4O2, because to the 4 iron atoms 4 oxygen molecules can bind. So to one hemoglobin total 4 can bind, so that is called Hb4O2, and this is called as a saturated hemoglobin. Saturated means no more oxygen molecules can bind to it. Suppose if I show that these 2 iron, suppose this and this, they are not bound by oxygen, so this structure is Hb2O2, it is unsaturated. So you know what saturated, unsaturated is. Saturated means no more oxygen molecules can bind to the hemoglobin. Is this clear? So Hb4O2 structure, why is it formed? I hope it is clear. Now we'll come to this part later on, that why does this structure, which is Hb4O2, why does it dissociate or why does it break when it reaches the cells? Okay, we know that the cells require oxygen, but what is causing this to break? So that part we will see later on. Okay, now we come to a part which is called as saturation of hemoglobin. Okay, so what do you mean by saturation of hemoglobin? So a fully saturated hemoglobin, as I have already told you, will have 4 molecules of oxygen attached to it. If there are less than 4 molecules of oxygen attached to the hemoglobin, then it will be unsaturated. Now what will decide how saturated the hemoglobin is? What do you think will decide whether the oxygen can combine with hemoglobin easily or not? So only one thing decides that, and that thing is called as partial pressure. Okay, the partial pressure of oxygen will decide how saturated the hemoglobin is. So if the partial pressure of oxygen is very, very high, as in alveolar air where it is 104 millimeters of mercury, then almost all the hemoglobin will be saturated. If the partial pressure is low, then the hemoglobin molecule will be very less saturated with oxygen. I hope you are getting it. See, partial pressure is directly proportional to the concentration. So if the concentration of oxygen is high, obviously the partial pressure of oxygen will be high in that place. For example, when you take air inside your lungs, your alveoli are filled with air, so oxygen concentration is high over there, so partial pressure is high. If concentration is low, partial pressure will also be low. So saturation is decided by the partial pressure. So in the alveolar air where the saturation is almost, see, in the alveolar air the partial pressure, so I will write down pp. So partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolar air is how much? 104 millimeters of mercury. Okay, this is in the alveolar air, correct? So this is the highest partial pressure of oxygen found anywhere in the body. So what do you think will be the saturation of hemoglobin? Saturation of hemoglobin will be very, very high, almost 95 to 97% of hemoglobin is saturated at this partial pressure. See, 100% hemoglobin is never saturated. Partial pressure is very, very high. That doesn't mean that all the hemoglobin molecules will be fully saturated. There will be some molecules which are less saturated. For example, when I say that saturation of hemoglobin is 97%, that means that if there are 100 molecules of hemoglobin in a red blood cell, then out of those 100 molecules, 97 molecules of hemoglobin have 4 oxygen molecules attached to them, whereas the remaining 3, they may have less than 4 oxygen molecules attached. Okay, are you understanding? So there is never 100% saturation. ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होगा कि सब के सब हीमोग्लोबिन है, उनके सबके ऊपर 4 ऑक्सीजन अटैच्ड है, वैसा कोई भी सिनेरियो में नहीं होगा. That is only theoretical. Practically in real life that doesn't happen. Is this clear? So this high saturation of hemoglobin, when is it found? It is found when the partial pressure of oxygen is highest. So what will happen as the partial pressure of oxygen decreases? Suppose if I say that now the partial pressure of oxygen is, let us say it is 30 millimeters of mercury. So I have reduced the partial pressure a lot. So at that time what will be the saturation? So approximately at that time the saturation of hemoglobin is only 50%. Okay, so only 50% of the total hemoglobin molecules present in the red blood cell are fully saturated. Rest 50% are less saturated, or some of them are not saturated at all. Are you getting my point? So saturation of hemoglobin is directly proportional to the partial pressure of oxygen if I want to saturate it with oxygen. Is this clear? So more partial pressure of oxygen, more saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Less partial pressure of oxygen, less saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. I hope this is clear. Okay. Now, taking whatever we have studied into account up till now, we can actually draw a graph. Okay. And if I want to draw the graph on the y-axis, I am going to take saturation of oxygen, saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen on the y-axis. So I am writing over here hemoglobin saturation with oxygen. Okay, and that will be in the percentage form. So I am going to write over here, this is 20%, this is 40%, this is 60%, this is 80%. Okay, and I will need to extend my y-axis up till, let's say, here. Okay, and this is 100%. So the saturation graph I have shown on the y-axis, saturation of hemoglobin. On the x-axis I am going to plot the partial pressure of oxygen. So again that is going to be 20, 40, 60, 80 and 100, but here the units is going to be what? Millimeters of mercury, correct? Because we are talking about partial pressure. So I have plotted a graph of, let me just complete writing this, partial pressure of oxygen. So I have plotted a graph of hemoglobin saturation of oxygen on the y-axis with partial pressure of oxygen. Now let us see what the graph comes to. Okay, so normally when such a graph is plotted, the curve which is obtained is a sigmoid curve. So the graph is like this. Okay, so it is slightly an S-shaped curve, if you can see. Okay, it is not exactly like S, but this is called as a sigmoid curve, a curve which is like this. Okay, this curve is called as a sigmoid curve. So when you see this curve, what do you understand? First of all, if you check this out, this is where the partial pressure of oxygen is 100. So this value, if you see over here, then it coincides to somewhere around 90% of saturation. Okay, similarly if you see over here, if you see 40 millimeters partial pressure, then you see that it is somewhere around 30% saturated. So what do you understand from this graph? More the partial pressure of oxygen, more will be hemoglobin saturation with oxygen, less will be the partial pressure, less will be the saturation. Common sense, okay? Because see, more partial pressure means more concentration of oxygen is present. Less partial pressure means less concentration of oxygen is present. If concentration of oxygen is more, obviously it will bind easily to hemoglobin, more oxygen will bind. If concentration of oxygen is less, less hemoglobin will bind. So I hope this graph is very clear. Okay, now, okay. So this is the standard graph. Okay, this is the normal graph when your respiration is occurring properly. Okay, so this is the graph which I can say that it is at normal carbon dioxide level. So let me write this down over here. I am writing down normal carbon dioxide level. So partial pressure of carbon dioxide is regular. Now if I want to draw this same graph but with increased amount of carbon dioxide, so with increased concentration of carbon dioxide, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will increase. So what will happen if I draw such a graph? If I draw such a graph, then the graph will be somewhat like this. So I am drawing a dotted graph now. Okay, so this graph is the graph which is with increased carbon dioxide. Now first of all, this graph with increased carbon dioxide has shifted towards the right. Why has it shifted towards the right? Because if you see, now let us take the same examples. Now at 100% saturation of oxygen, okay, now let us take this example. So let me just draw a perpendicular so that you understand. Now I am taking 100% partial pressure, 100 millimeters of mercury partial pressure of oxygen. Now if you see the saturation values over here, then for the original graph the saturation was almost up to approximately 90%, correct? But if you see the value for this, the saturation, if you take the value backwards, then the saturation is 70%. So the partial pressure of oxygen is same in the case of both the graphs, but when carbon dioxide is increased, the saturation of hemoglobin decreases. Why is it so? Because see, it is very simple. Increased carbon dioxide will prevent oxygen from binding easily to hemoglobin. Less levels of carbon dioxide means oxygen can bind easily to the hemoglobin. So in this second graph which we have shown with increased carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide has increased and it is preventing the oxygen from easily binding with the hemoglobin. To the hemoglobin oxygen will bind, but not as easily as compared to this previous graph. So in this second graph you can see that the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen has gone down. And that is why we say that when carbon dioxide partial pressure is increased or when carbon dioxide concentration is increased, the graph or this curve moves towards the right. Now if I want to draw another graph, let me draw it with orange color, but here I want to show that the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less than normal. Okay, so now what is going to happen? So that graph will shift towards the left. I hope everybody is understanding this. This is the graph with less carbon dioxide. Less carbon dioxide means concentration of carbon dioxide is less or partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less. So now why is it shifting to the left? Because partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less. So now oxygen can easily bind to hemoglobin. So now comparing those same values at 100 millimeters of mercury partial pressure of oxygen, now the percentage saturation will be even more. It might even be 100%. Because now carbon dioxide partial pressure is less, so it is not interfering much with oxygen. So with this, what do you understand? That if partial pressure of oxygen is much more compared to partial pressure of carbon dioxide, oxygen can easily go and saturate hemoglobin. If you increase the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, then the ease with which oxygen saturates hemoglobin, that decreases. If you increase carbon dioxide partial pressure so much that it increases more than partial pressure of oxygen, then carbon dioxide will not allow oxygen to bind to hemoglobin at all. Carbon dioxide itself will go and bind. So both the gases are competing to attach with hemoglobin. Obviously, oxygen has more affinity towards hemoglobin, but if you increase carbon dioxide, the chances of oxygen attaching to hemoglobin, those chances decreases, and that is why you can see that with same partial pressure of oxygen, you have three different saturation values, but that is dependent on your carbon dioxide levels. Is this clear? Okay, so this graph which I have drawn, it is commonly called as the oxygen dissociation curve, and the short form is ODC. This graph is also called as oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, or it is also called as oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. And this curve shows that as you increase the partial pressure of oxygen, the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen increases, but in that same graph, if you keep on increasing partial pressure of carbon dioxide, then saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, it keeps on decreasing. Is this clear? Okay, so this graph is important. It is very important for all the students who are going to give NEET or CET exams. So please remember this, okay, and please understand this graph. So on the y-axis we have plotted hemoglobin saturated with oxygen, and on the y-axis we have plotted hemoglobin saturated with oxygen, and on the x-axis we have plotted the partial pressure of oxygen. Partial pressure can also be written as tension, so this is also called as tension of oxygen. Okay, so now from this graph we can basically understand two effects which are given. Okay, and those effects I will just write down over here. The first effect is called as Bohr's effect. Okay, what is Bohr's effect? So basically Bohr's effect explains this graph by saying that the partial pressures of carbon dioxide will basically cause this oxygen dissociation curve to shift. So if there is less partial pressure of carbon dioxide than normal, then the curve will shift towards the left, and if the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more than normal, then the curve will shift towards the right, and that is what is called as the Bohr's effect. So Bohr's effect explains how partial pressure of carbon dioxide plays a role on this oxygen dissociation curve. The next effect that we have to study is called as the Haldane effect. What is the Haldane effect? So Haldane effect basically tells you that both oxygen and carbon dioxide are competing with each other to bind with hemoglobin. For example, in the alveolar air, partial pressure of oxygen is very high, it is 104 millimeters of mercury, whereas carbon dioxide partial pressure in alveolar air is only 40 millimeters of mercury. So what happens? Since oxygen has a very high partial pressure, at that time oxygen combines with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. But at the tissue level, at the cell level, what happens is the cell produces carbon dioxide continuously because of respiration. Byproduct of respiration is that. So because of that, what happens is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide at the cellular level or near the cell, it increases a lot, whereas the oxygen which is coming in, its partial pressure is comparatively less. So at that point, what happens? The carbon dioxide removes the oxygen from the hemoglobin and it itself gets attached. So at that time HbCO2 is formed. So this is called as Haldane's effect. So Haldane's effect says that carbon dioxide can only attach to hemoglobin only when the partial pressure of oxygen is very low, or when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide exceeds the partial pressure of oxygen. That is called as Haldane's effect. Is this clear? So both these effects can be explained with the help of this graph, and this graph is called as oxygen dissociation curve. Is this clear? Okay, so with this, friends, we complete the first part of our today's lecture, and that is transport of oxygen. Please remember, oxyhemoglobin is Hb4O2. However, while writing normally, Hb4O2 is also written as HbO2. Okay, so at that time don't think, oh, why have those people not written 4O2. HbO2, Hb4O2 are same, because every time writing 4O2 is very inconvenient. So oxyhemoglobin can be written like this, or obviously it can be written as this, but this means that hemoglobin is fully saturated. This is normally the term used for writing oxyhemoglobin HbO2. Is this clear? Okay, so with that we finish this part. Now the next part of the chapter is dependent on carbon dioxide transport. Okay, so let us start with that. I will rub this off. Transport of carbon dioxide. So now carbon dioxide is created in the cells, right? It is a byproduct of respiration. You remember that reaction, glucose plus oxygen gives rise to carbon dioxide, water, and 38 molecules of ATP. So that carbon dioxide, now you need to take it to the lungs because you want to remove it. So how is it possible? So transport of carbon dioxide occurs in three ways. Okay, see, transport of oxygen occurs in two ways. The dissolved oxygen, which is 3%, that will go and that will be taken by cells, and 97% is attached to hemoglobin. Transport of carbon dioxide, there are three ways. First is transport of carbon dioxide which is dissolved in plasma. Okay. Second is transport of carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonate ion. So bicarbonate ion is written as HCO3 minus. And third transport of carbon dioxide is attached with RBC in the form of HbCO2. Okay, so there are three ways in which carbon dioxide can be taken from the cell and transported to lungs. The most important part out of these three is this second one, which is in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, is this clear? So let us start with this. Please remember, this occurs 70% of the times, this occurs 23% of the times, and this occurs only 7% of the time. So maximum amount of carbon dioxide is transferred in the form of bicarbonate ions. Least amount of carbon dioxide is transferred by dissolving in plasma, and then we come to attachment with hemoglobin. Is this clear? So let us start with the first part of transport, that is the carbon dioxide which is dissolved in plasma. Now this is very simple. Okay, so the carbon dioxide which is released by the cell, so I am just drawing a cell over here, correct? This is a cell, okay, and this cell is releasing the carbon dioxide, that is because of respiration. Now this carbon dioxide, it will dissolve in the plasma of blood. So this has been released in the blood, and it is going to react with water in the blood, and it is going to form a compound which is called as H2CO3, which is carbonic acid. Okay, and what happens is, in the plasma, this carbonic acid is present in the form of ions, so it splits up into H plus ion and HCO3 minus ions. Okay, so these ions are present when the carbon dioxide dissolves in the plasma. I hope you understand, plasma is the liquid in the blood. So if you want to see how it exactly is, so just imagine these are the RBCs, okay, and just imagine this liquid which I am drawing in blue, which is surrounding the RBCs, that is called as the plasma, and total this is the blood. Okay, so this carbon dioxide is dissolving in this plasma, water in the plasma, it is forming carbonic acid, and carbonic acid is in the form of ions. Now what happens is, this carbon dioxide is dissolved, okay, it is in the form of ions. Now that blood will go towards the lungs, the blood is going to go to the lungs. Okay, what is going to carry that? The pulmonary artery is going to do that, correct? So now, so the pulmonary artery is basically going to carry this deoxygenated blood to the lungs, correct? You know that. So now near the lungs, what happens is, this deoxygenated blood which is present, it will undergo some changes. For example, all these reactions will become reversible. So when this blood carrying these ions, it reaches the lungs, what happens is this H plus and this HCO3 minus ions, they combine again and they form H2CO3, and this H2CO3 now splits up back into carbon dioxide and water. And now you know that the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in that capillary is 45 millimeters, so it diffuses into the alveoli, and even this water vapor diffuses. So I hope this first part of transport of carbon dioxide is clear. Okay, so what do you have to remember? In the plasma, the carbon dioxide gets dissolved. This is only 7% of the total transport. Please remember, out of the 100% carbon dioxide produced, only 7% will be transported like this. So once again, cell will produce carbon dioxide. 7% of that carbon dioxide will go in the water of plasma. It will dissolve and it will form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid will dissociate to form two ions, H plus, HCO3 minus. So these ions are carried by the blood towards the lungs. So in the pulmonary capillaries, what happens is these both ions, they combine again back, so it is a reversible reaction to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid splits into CO2 and H2O. CO2 diffuses out, water vapor diffuses out. So carbon dioxide is released. So we are done with the first part of transport of carbon dioxide. Now let us come to the second method. So I'm just going to rub this off. Second method of transport of carbon dioxide, which is the most important method, is called as transport in the form of bicarbonate ions. Okay, second method. So this is a very important method of transport of carbon dioxide. Okay, so please pay extra attention to this method. Now what happens is, see, you have already seen that 7% of carbon dioxide gets dissolved in the plasma, and you know carbonic acid is formed, the ions are formed, and then when that blood reaches the lungs, again the ions combine to form carbonic acid, and carbonic acid gets converted into carbon dioxide water, and it diffuses from pulmonary capillary to the alveolar air. Now in this method, the same thing is going to happen, but it is going to occur inside the RBC. So now I'm going to draw a diagram over here. Okay, so this is your cell. Okay, and from the cell, the carbon dioxide is removed out during respiration. Now just let us assume that this is your RBC. Okay, so this is the RBC, red blood cell, and surrounding that red blood cell is the plasma. Now what happens in this method is, this carbon dioxide which is released by the cell, it doesn't dissolve in the plasma. Okay, that we have already seen. Most of the carbon dioxide, it goes inside the RBC. Okay, so almost 70% of the carbon dioxide enters the RBC, so it gets diffused in the in the RBC. And what happens is, inside the RBC, the same reactions are going to happen which occurred in the plasma. Okay, so I'm just going to increase the size of the RBC so that I can draw the reactions. So now the carbon dioxide enters the RBC. Okay, in the RBC, water is present because RBC is a cell. Every cell has got water of its own. So this carbon dioxide reacts with water, and this is all happening inside the red blood cell. Please remember, this is not happening in the plasma. Plasma is outside. So this reacts with H2O and it forms H2CO3. Okay, and H2CO3 again dissociates as H plus and HCO3 minus ions. Are you getting this point? So the same reaction is happening which was happening in the plasma. However, these reactions are much more faster compared to the reactions in the plasma, because over here there is a catalyst which is increasing the pace of the reaction, and that catalyst is called as carbonic anhydrase. Please remember this. So this carbonic anhydrase is present inside the RBC. It is not present in the plasma. What is this carbonic anhydrase going to do? It is going to do the same thing. So that will help the carbon dioxide to dissolve in water and form carbonic acid. carbonic acid will dissociate into its ion form, but all these reactions will be much faster compared to the reactions occurring in the plasma, which we have already studied. Okay, so 70% of the reactions happen inside the RBC, 7% of those same reactions occur in the plasma. Okay, so now this keeps on forming. So now what happens is, over the period of time, since most of the carbon dioxide enters the RBC, so actually I should be drawing this arrow over here, okay, so that you understand that it enters the RBC. So most of the carbon dioxide, since it is entering the RBC, the amount of H plus and HCO3 minus ions which are formed, they keep on increasing. Okay, see, there are H plus and HCO3 minus ions present even outside the cell, even outside the RBC, because the same reactions are occurring in the plasma, but the amount of these ions inside the RBC is much more, because most of the carbon dioxide is going in. So what happens is, because of that, a gradient is created. Higher concentration of these ions are there in RBC and lesser concentration of these ions are there outside the RBC, that is into the plasma. So what happens is, next thing that is going to happen is, there is going to be diffusion. So these ions which are present inside, since they are in higher concentration, they will diffuse outside into the plasma. So this is the plasma, the liquid which is surrounding the RBCs, correct? But what happens is, this H plus ion, these protons which are generated, okay, instead of diffusing out, what they do is, these H plus ions, they basically go and bind with hemoglobin which is present on the RBC itself. Okay, so if this is the hemoglobin which is present on the RBC, then this protons, they go and combine with this hemoglobin, and what happens is, a structure called as HHB is formed. So see, additional hydrogen atoms which are produced over here, they do not diffuse out. Instead of that, those additional H plus atoms, they combine with the hemoglobin of that RBC to form HHB, and this compound is called as reduced hemoglobin. Okay, so H plus is taken care of. What about HCO3 minus? So HCO3 minus doesn't combine with anything, since its concentration is higher in the RBC, it will move out and it will go into the plasma, correct? So this is your plasma. Plasma is also having HCO3 minus, but concentration is less. In the RBC, concentration of HCO3 minus is more. Why is it more? Because most of the carbon dioxide is, instead of dissolving in the plasma, most of it is going inside the RBC, and you see these reactions. So most of the bicarbonates are formed in RBC. So because of the concentration being higher, it diffuses out. So you know this, okay, it diffuses out into the plasma. Now what happens to this HCO3 minus in the plasma is, this HCO3 minus ions, bicarbonate ions, they react with sodium and potassium salts. Okay, so sodium salts and potassium salts both will react, and they will form two compounds which are NaHCO3, which is sodium bicarbonate, and KHCO3, which is potassium bicarbonate. And both these compounds which are formed, they act like buffers. Okay, so what is a buffer? A buffer is anything which maintains the pH of a solution. So these salts act like buffers in maintaining the pH of blood. So is this clear? Okay, now what is happening is, because this bicarbonate ions from the RBCs, since they are diffusing out into the plasma, the RBC is losing its negative charge. Bicarbonate ion has a negative charge. Okay, so if this is going out and diffusing, so the negative charge inside the RBC is decreasing. So this makes the RBC very, very unstable. Charge wise, the RBC becomes stable because it is continuously losing its negative charge. And why is it losing? Because this bicarbonate ion is diffusing out. So now, to make sure that the negative charge of RBC is not lost, what happens is, you need to send a negative charge inside. Is this correct? So what happens is, negative charge enters the RBC from the plasma. So what is going to enter? See, bicarbonate ions will not enter back, because bicarbonate ions are already in a lesser concentration in the plasma. So they are not going to enter back in the RBC. So you need some other negative ion which will enter the RBC so that the lost negative charge is restored, and that takes place in the form of chloride ions. So the plasma is made up of many ions: sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride. So the chloride ions which are present in the plasma surrounding the RBC, they enter the RBC, okay, to make up for the lost negative charge which has gone out in the form of bicarbonate. So chloride ions from the plasma begin to enter the RBC and they replace the lost negative charge, and this entire phenomena is called as chloride shift. Is a very important topic, okay. So this entire part of transport of carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonates has a very important part which is called as the chloride shift. Is this clear? Okay, or this is also called as Hamburger's phenomena. So that is the name of the scientist who discovered it, and on his name the phenomena is given. Okay, once again, why are chloride ions entering the RBC? So after respiration the cell produces carbon dioxide. Continuously carbon dioxide is being produced. 7% of it we have already seen, it is in the plasma, it is dissolved in plasma and it is in H plus bicarbonate ions. But now we are studying transport of carbon dioxide through bicarbonate. So what happens? Most of the carbon dioxide, almost 70%. So let me write over here, 70% of carbon dioxide goes inside the RBC. It dissolves in the water present inside the RBC to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissociates to form proton and bicarbonate ions. So their concentration keeps on increasing inside the RBC. So what happens is diffusion occurs because gradient is created. Now protons which are produced extra, they do not diffuse out because they go and bind with hemoglobin to form reduced hemoglobin. But bicarbonate ions cannot bind with anything, so they go out in the plasma. So when those bicarbonate ions are leaving the red blood cell, the red blood cell is losing its negative charge. So how do you maintain that negative charge? By pulling some negative ion from outside. So which ions are those? Those are the chloride ions. So chloride ions will go inside the RBC. That is called as chloride shift. Now what happens to the bicarbonate ions? Outside in the plasma they combine with potassium and sodium salts. So the reaction is very simple. Na plus plus HCO3 minus gives you NaCO3 sodium bicarbonate. K plus plus HCO3 minus gives you KHCO3 potassium bicarbonate. And these salts acts like buffer, so they maintain the pH of blood. Is this clear? So all this is happening near the cell, okay, all this is happening near the cell. I hope you understand. Now this blood is deoxygenated blood, okay. Now this blood will go towards the lungs, correct, because you want to remove carbon dioxide, right? You have not removed carbon dioxide yet. So what happens is, as soon as this blood enters the pulmonary capillaries, the capillary which is surrounding the alveolar, what happens is exactly all the opposite things will start again. So first of all, what is going to happen? As soon as that blood reaches the alveoli, now these ions which are present, see, some ions are still present inside. Bicarbonate ions and protons or hydrogen atoms, they are not completely lost. All the protons do not bind with hemoglobin, or all the bicarbonate doesn't go out. It only goes out till both the sides the concentration is correct. So you still have H plus and HCO3 minus ions inside. Now we are talking about the situation near the lungs. So I will rub this off now, okay, and now I am drawing this as the alveoli or alveolar surface, okay. Now what will happen is all the reverse reactions will happen. So this H plus and HCO3 minus present in the RBC, that will be catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase and it will be converted into H2CO3. Same thing that we learned in plasma. And H2CO3 will break up into H2O plus CO2, and this CO2 which is formed, that has partial pressure of 45 millimeters, you know, and that will diffuse into the alveoli because carbon dioxide in the alveoli has partial pressure of 40. Even water vapor diffuses. So carbon dioxide is given out. Is this clear? Are you getting my point? Okay, so this is the second mode of transport of carbon dioxide through the action of bicarbonates. After we finish with this entire transport of carbon dioxide, we are going to draw two diagrams and we are going to see the transport of both oxygen and carbon dioxide. So I hope this part is clear. 70% of carbon dioxide is transferred back in this manner. Is this clear? Okay, so the same reactions are occurring in the RBC and the plasma, but please remember this chloride shift is happening inside the RBC. I have told you why it's happening, and these bicarbonate ions which are released out, they combine with sodium potassium to form salts which act as buffer. This reduced hemoglobin HHB also acts like a buffer, so it doesn't increase the acidity, because many people will think that this is hydrogen, so protons will increase the acidity. No, it also acts like a buffer. Is this clear? So we have finished with two methods of transport of carbon dioxide. Now let us come to the last and the third method of release of carbon dioxide, which is a very easy method, and that method is attachment or binding with hemoglobin in the RBC. Okay, so just like how oxygen binds with hemoglobin, even carbon dioxide can bind. However, only 23% of carbon dioxide is released when it is bound with hemoglobin. So 7% is transported through plasma, 70% is transported through bicarbonate ions. Only 23% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of binding with hemoglobin. So what happens is, now again, this is the cell. Okay, the cell produces carbon dioxide. Now what happens is, this 23% of this carbon dioxide goes and it binds with hemoglobin. So now it is not entering the RBC, nor is it dissolving in plasma, but it is binding with the hemoglobin present on RBC, and this hemoglobin and carbon dioxide bind and they form a compound called HbCO2. Now this compound is called as carbaminohemoglobin. Now why is it called as carbaminohemoglobin? Because this carbon dioxide attaches to the amino group of the hemoglobin. See, hemoglobin is a very complex molecule. It has got iron, it has got amino groups. So the amino group in this hemoglobin, to that amino group this carbon dioxide attaches, and it is called as carbaminohemoglobin. The molecular formula is HbCO2. So this HbCO2 is formed in the blood. Now what will happen, as this blood goes to the lungs, again the reverse reactions in the pulmonary capillary. Since you know that the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 millimeters of mercury, that high partial pressure will cause this bond to break, and HbCO2 will break into carbon dioxide and Hb. Okay, and this Hb will be given into the alveoli. I hope you are getting this point. So this is very simple mode of transport. You don't have to remember much. Just remember, carbon dioxide and hemoglobin form a structure. They dissociate when they reach the lungs. Dissociation is because of high partial pressure. Is this clear? So with that we finish the transport of carbon dioxide. Okay, so first method of transport is through plasma. It gets dissolved in the plasma. The H2CO3 is formed, dissociate to form ions. That blood, when it is carried back to the lungs, reverse reactions occur. Both the ions join to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissociates to form H2O, both are released out. Second method, all the reactions are same, but they are occurring inside the RBC. 70% of carbon dioxide is transported in that way. What is making these reactions faster? Catalyst called carbonic anhydrase, which is present inside the RBC, not in the plasma. Chloride shift happens, I have already explained that. HCO3 ions which go in the plasma, they combine with potassium sodium ions, they form the respective bicarbonates which act as buffers. And inside the RBC, the extra protons or hydrogen which are formed combined with hemoglobin to form HHB, reduced hemoglobin. Okay, they also act as buffers. Is this clear? So friends, we have finished with the internal respiration today. We have finished with transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now just let us make a summary of what we have studied. So I am going to draw two diagrams. Okay, And these diagrams are also given in your textbooks. If you look at the state board textbook or the CBSE textbooks, there are two diagrams given. So let us just sketch this diagram. The first diagram that I am going to draw is the diagram of gaseous exchange between cell and the RBC. Okay, so now just imagine this is the tissue, all these are the cells. Okay, and these cells are undergoing respiration and they are releasing carbon dioxide, correct? And now let me draw an RBC over here. So if possible we can choose the red color. Okay, so I am drawing an RBC over here. This is the RBC, correct? And outside over here I am showing liquid, because I hope everybody knows that the tissue has got cells, and between the cells there is a liquid which is called as interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid helps in exchange of materials. So this is your interstitial fluid. All those who don't know what interstitial fluid is, kindly look at my lecture which is based on open circulation versus closed circulation. You will come to know what this is. So the liquid in the tissue surrounding the cells is called interstitial liquid or interstitial fluid. So what is going to happen is, this is there. Now this is the vessel which is bringing the blood, oxygenated blood, to the cells. So first thing I am going to write down the equation of oxygen transport. So what is going to happen is, inside this obviously what is present, oxyhemoglobin is present. So I am going to write HbO2. I am not going to write Hb4O2. It is understood Hb4O2, HbO2, it is the same thing. So as soon as the RBC reaches near the cells, the increased carbon dioxide partial pressure causes this to break, and what happens is, this hemoglobin stays as it is, whereas oxygen which is there, that oxygen goes to the cells and it is used during respiration. Is this clear? So we have shown the transport of oxygen. Hb4O2 or HbO2 has been broken and oxygen molecules have gone to the cells through the interstitial fluid. Hb is free now. Okay, now we have to show transport of carbon dioxide. Three methods. First method is dissolving in the plasma. So just imagine that this entire area is the plasma, correct? The area which I have shaded in green. So now what is going to happen is, first method of transport is through dissolving of carbon dioxide in the plasma. So now I am going to show that carbon dioxide is released by the cells, correct? This carbon dioxide combines with the water in the plasma and it gives rise to H2CO3. We have already studied this. H2CO3 dissociates as H plus and HCO3 minus. That's it. So right now this diagram is showing what is happening near the cells. So these ions are formed in the cells. Now coming to the second method. What is the second method of transport of carbon dioxide? That is through the formation of bicarbonate ions. So again, now I am going to show that carbon dioxide is released from the cells, but this carbon dioxide reacts with the water inside the RBCs, and what do you get? You get H2CO3. Please remember, carbonic anhydrase you have to write down, and they dissociate again in the same form, H plus and HCO3 minus ions. Is this clear? Okay. So this is approximately 7%. This is how much percent? 70%. Okay, but we have not finished yet. What we have to show? We have to show that this H plus combines with hemoglobin and it gives me HHB, which is reduced hemoglobin. HCO3 minus, what happens? It goes out, okay, and outside HCO3 minus combines with K plus, or it combines with Na plus to give you KHCO3 or NaHCO3, and what will they be? They will be the salts which maintain the pH of the blood. But you also have to show chloride shift, so you can use a different color and you can show that Cl minus ions are going inside, and you can also write into bracket over here chloride shift, or it is also called as Hamburger's phenomena. Is this clear? Is this clear? Have we finished with transport of carbon dioxide? No, this is the second method. Third method of carbon dioxide transfer is Hb and CO2 attach with each other. So now this free Hb is present over here because oxygen has left. Now again I will show carbon dioxide arrow inside, okay, and how much carbon dioxide is going in this way, 23%. So this carbon dioxide plus this hemoglobin will give me HbCO2. So this diagram is over. I hope you have understood all the reactions. So in this diagram, I can label as gaseous exchange between RBC and tissue. So here oxygen is given out, carbon dioxide is collected in the RBC. All the methods I have shown, plasma transfer I have shown carbon dioxide, bicarbonate I have shown, chloride shift I have shown, and I have also shown with attachment of Hb, which is carbaminohemoglobin I have shown. I have also shown how oxyhemoglobin dissociates. Why does oxyhemoglobin dissociate? Because partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more, so it breaks the bond. Oxygen goes to the cells, carbon dioxide reacts. Is this clear? Is this diagram clear? Now we want to draw the diagram for gaseous exchange between RBC and alveoli. So now we have to make changes. So alveolus. Now what do? Very simple. We don't rub off everything, we just need to reverse most of the things. So first of all, coming to oxygen. Okay, so what is going to happen is, first of all, since transport of oxygen we are going to write first, so first thing that I am going to do is I am going to show that oxygen is going inside. Okay, and okay, so I will do one thing, I will rub this off so that you know. So now we don't need interstitial fluid, we don't need the cells, correct? Now what we need to show is, we need to show the alveolus. So alveolus I will show over here, okay, and this is the surface of alveolus, correct? So this is alveolus. So now first thing that I am showing is the oxygen goes in, correct, and this reacts with hemoglobin to form HbO2, or if you want you can write Hb4O2. so show 4 oxygen over here. So I have shown that oxyhemoglobin has been formed. So we are finished with oxygen. See, in the previous image we showed that HbO2 dissociates. Now we have shown how it forms. So we have finished with transport of oxygen. Now we have to show what happens to carbon dioxide. So first of all, coming to the carbon dioxide, how it is transferred from the plasma, you just have to reverse these arrows. Very simple. Okay, so now you show that these ions are already present. These ions, as soon as the RBC reaches near the alveoli, they get converted into H2CO3. H2CO3 breaks down into H2O and CO2, and this CO2 will enter the alveoli because partial pressure of carbon dioxide here is more than here, 45 to 40 it goes in. So carbon dioxide we have deposited, so from plasma carbon dioxide has been lost. Now we have to show what happens to these things. So now first of all, these ions which are present inside, okay, so this again we are going to reverse all the reactions. So H plus and HCO, please remember H plus HCO3 minus, all of them don't diffuse out, only extra ones diffuse out. So what happens is, now as soon as this red blood cell comes near alveoli, now the bond between HHB and the bond between H and HB breaks. So if you want you can write a reaction over here like this, that HB breaks down to give you hemoglobin, and it also breaks down to give you proton. So this happens because partial pressure of oxygen is more, so it causes this to break, hemoglobin is free, proton is released. Now this proton and this bicarbonate will react to form H2CO3. H2CO3 will be dissociated. Okay, so I am just rubbing all these things off so that it becomes easy. Okay, so this H2CO3 will dissociate as H2O plus CO2, and that CO2 will again enter the alveoli Are you getting my point? Because the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 45 over here, 40 over here, it will go in. Okay, so hemoglobin is again free, and with that free hemoglobin, oxygen binds. I have shown oxygen hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin. Now the last part of transfer of carbon dioxide, that is through HbCO2. So as soon as HbCO2 reaches near the alveoli, again partial pressure of oxygen causes this to break, and what is going to happen is we are going to reverse the arrow, and HbCO2 breaks up into CO2 plus Hb, and this Hb goes back into the alveoli. So in all the three ways you have transported carbon dioxide into the alveoli, correct? This is the first one through plasma, which is occurring only 7%. Then the next is through bicarbonate ions. Okay, so over here I should be writing carbonic anhydrase, and this is how much percent? This is approximately 70%, and this last one is how much percent? 30%. So have I successfully transported CO2 into the lungs? Yes, I have. Have I transported oxyhemoglobin, oxygen successfully to the cells? Yes, I have. Is this clear? So with that, friends, we finish this entire part of internal respiration. I hope you have understood this. Okay, these diagrams are very simple to understand. If you look at them in one glance, then you will feel confused. You might feel that they are very complex. They are not. Just remember, partial pressure of oxygen is very high in the alveolus. So that is why it removes carbon dioxide from the hemoglobin and itself gets attached. Whereas near the cell or tissue, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more, so it removes oxygen from the hemoglobin and itself gets attached. Okay, apart from that, transport of carbon dioxide also takes place in plasma. Very simple reactions. You have to form bicarbonate and protons, they will remain in plasma. Second method, very important, bicarbonate transfer in the form of bicarbonate ions. So here what happens is, inside RBC, CO2 diffuses, carbonic anhydrase looks after all the reactions, then there is chloride shift. I have already explained that to you couple of times, so you know that. So that ends our chapter over here. Sorry, that ends our part of topic over here. Next time we are going to start with the last part, which is called cellular respiration. Okay, so if this lecture made you learn something new today, please put in a like, share it with your friends. Okay, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe.